Short story by Paul McCann. Jacko's Ladder. It was another cold day in town. Nothing ever happened in Riverstown, especially on the weekend. It was always quiet. Grey clouds drifted through a patchy blue sky, and shadows covered the streets of the town. A wild winter's wind weaved its way through the empty school playground, sending papers and plastic bags scurrying here and there and everywhere. It was an eerie sight around the bog that slid itself amongst the rushes, and the sound of croaking frogs echoed up from the bog to the paths and drowned out the singing of the birds. There were about 100 people who lived in Frogview Street, and inside one of the tiny houses was an old man searching each drawer and cupboard. He held an old clay pipe in his hand. Opening up the window, he leaned out and shouted in a creaky voice, "Jacko, come here!" At the top of the hill in Frogview Street were a group of boys playing marbles on some spare ground. One of the boys lifted an ear to the wind and said, "Jacko, it's your granddad. You better go." "Lucky you. I was just about to skin you all. I'll see you later then." Jacko scooped up all the marbles he had won. Some of them were as big as half a crown. It was almost impossible for him to walk out with so many marbles in his pockets. After a slow and uncomfortable walk down the hill, he opened up the front door to his granddad's house, and before he said a word to anyone, he emptied out his pockets onto the floor. His granddad walked over and said, "When you get back, I'll do you a game, Jacko." "Where am I going, Grandad? Huh?" Jacko replied. "To buy me some pipe tobacco." "Oh, not again," said Jacko. "Why is it, dear? I'm just about done again." "Don't fret, Grandad. I'll get you some." "I'll choke if I don't get a smoke." "It's no joke, Grandad." "Am I laughing?" "You will be when I get back with your tobacco." The old man pulled off an overcoat from the hot stand, and he took out a handkerchief and blew his nose. At the same time, he quickly put his hand into a secret inside pocket and counted out some silver coins. Handing over the coins to Jacko, he said, "Quick now, off you go, and don't be all day." Off Jacko went. The wind picked up and chilled his cheek, and Jacko pulled the collar up, covering the nape of his neck, and continuing along the road that made its way to the school, took the shortcut through the brickyard that was rough, but Jacko was able and agile on his feet. Like a deer, he leapt from stone to stone and delicately walked on the balls of his feet to the edge of the wall that surrounded the old brickyard's world, where the yard was now abandoned for years. And jumping about 6 feet down from the wall, Jacko made his way past the kiln furnace and stopped dead there at the railway carriage tracks. Outside an old storage shed, a wooden ladder lay up against the side of the water house. It was much too tempting to climb, and so with urgency Jacko started up the ladder. Rung by rung he went, higher and higher and faster. Jacko looked back down the ladder and to his surprise saw no sign of the brickyard, and Riverstown itself had vanished from view. What he did see above his head was a thick, cotton-covered white cloud that he stepped onto from the ladder. The cloud felt like it was rock under his feet, and he walked along a path that took him to a sign that read, "Welcome to Cloud 9." A little further on, Jacko came to a large building covered with a red velvet brick kind of surface, and silver and gold frames around windows that Jack found a door opening up and walked inside, where he found a hallway with many doors. Outside one of the doors was a doormat. Jacko opened up the door and found a small arched shaped door with a big doorbell button that stood there beside a big door handle, and Jacko pressed the button and the door swung open by itself. As he walked inside, he heard all this fantastic music playing, and there were flashing coloured lights with a welcome sign glowing away. A huge television screen was mounted upon a wall, and the food was laid out on a table. There were soft chairs and a white fluffy carpet upon the floor. For the first time in Jacko's life, he felt as if he fitted in and was wanted somewhere. Ever since his parents had abandoned him with his grandfather, Jacko had tried to keep it all together, pretending that he was okay and showing others how strong he was. No one really knew how hurt he was and how sad he felt inside. Even though his granddad loved him and did all that he could for him, Jacko at times, well, that just wasn't enough. Jacko was alone with his rejection and couldn't shake off the lost happiness of years without his mum and dad around him. The fact was, his mum and dad were incapable of loving one another, and like cancer it spread through and killed the love that they had for Jacko. Jacko never understood why this had happened and blamed himself for their parents' problems. As Jacko stood there listening to the music, he was met by an angel who placed her wings around him. "I am a messenger who has been told to bring you some good news, Jacko. God loves you and had been watching everything that you've suffered for years. Now, it's the day for change in your life." Jacko looked hesitant, but he smiled and replied, "Does God know why Mum and Dad left me alone?" "Why, yes, of course. The reason they left you alone is so that you could know His love for you. And His love is greater than theirs. And even though they left you, He will never leave you, Jacko. God has at this very moment planned to bring your mum and dad back together again." "How can God do that?" the angel replied. "Let's watch what happens." They both sat down on a comfy chair and watched a movie on the huge TV screen. Jacko was in the movie, and as he looked up at the angel, he said, "Shh, let's just watch." Jacko was wearing rags for clothes and stood begging for money on a pavement. First his mum walked past and stopped. She stood horrified and looked at Jacko, who smiled and called her by her name, saying, "I'm sorry for causing you and Dad so much trouble, Mum. Could you spare me a few coins? I'm very hungry. I've nowhere to stay." Immediately, and by some strange coincidence, Jacko's dad walked by. He looked at Jacko and his wife standing there and began to cry. And it wasn't long before all three stood there weeping openly on the footpath. Unknown to the three, a white dove descended from above and landed one by one on the heads of all three people. The angel turned off the television screen and kissed Jacko and said, "Now it's time for you to go." "Go where?" asked Jacko. "Back down the ladder." The angel walked with Jacko, who just remembered about his granddad's pipe tobacco. "Oh God!" said Jacko. The angel smiled and began to laugh. "Well, God doesn't really approve of this. But here, give this to your granddad and tell him if he doesn't stop smoking, it will kill him." "You really do know everything," Jacko said, as a white dove rested on his shoulder. The angel waved Jacko goodbye as he went back down the ladder. "Will I ever see you again?" Jacko asked. "One day we will all meet again. Have a great life, Jacko. You have a big future ahead of you." When Jacko finally got to the bottom of the ladder, he ran all the way back to his granddad's house and was joined at the gate by his mum and dad, who said, "Jacko, where on earth have you been? It's time to go back home. Your dinner's ready. It's in the oven. Hurry up." Jacko started to laugh. "Okay, Mum and Dad, I'm coming. I just have to give something to Grandad." Jacko ran inside and handed the tobacco tin to his grandfather, who seemed a little puzzled. He looked at Jacko and said, "What on earth have you given me that for? You know I stopped smoking a long time ago. Jacko, I don't need it anymore." Jacko saw a dove rest over his grandfather's head, and Jacko said, "That's right, Grandad. I found this tin and wondered what to do with it." His granddad took it, and he threw it into the bin. "You better go, Jacko. Your mum and dad are waiting for you." Jacko gave his granddad a great big hug, and he said, "Thanks for everything. I love you, Grandad." His granddad seemed a bit taken back and waved goodbye to Jacko as he walked out the door. Jacko returned home with his parents as if they had never been apart. That night before bed, Jacko said a big thank you to God. The moon was extra bright that night, and the stars seemed to shine brighter than they had ever shone before. The end.